Good morning. I told Barbara that we start on time, so it's 9:40, so we're going to start. Yes, I didn't realize when we invited Barbara for today that it was daylight savings time, and that Hope was on break, and that we have an orientation class starting at the same time. So we have a bunch of things going on today, but we are very glad that you're here today. Barbara Van Horssen is from the Momentum Center, where she's a founder and experimenter, executive director at the Momentum Center here in Holland and Grand Haven, which she's going to tell you all about, but a nonprofit grassroots movement to create a stigma-free community. She has over 25 years of experience in healthcare administration, nonprofit administration, and ministry. She's born in Muskegon, has 2 sons and a grandson.
They are the best.
They are the best. And she's walked the halls of Grand Valley State University, Western Seminary, and Baker College. So thank you, Barbara. Welcome today.
Thank you. I am delighted to be here, and maybe the choice of week isn't optimal, but I'm always grateful for any opportunity to share the work that we're doing at the Momentum Center and invite other people to be part of that work. I want to start by introducing you to my son, Alex. He's my youngest. He was a junior at Central High School when he had his first break with reality, and he was a senior when he had his second break. And then in 2014, we spent about 5.5 months in and out of the hospital and residential care until we finally found the right medication to treat his schizophrenia and stabilize his life. Importantly, one of the first messages we received when he was finally given that diagnosis was not to tell anybody. Right there in the literature, it said be very, very cautious about anybody you share this information with. And I know the intent was to protect him, but the reality is that that also perpetuates stigma and shame. Attitudes toward mental illness really haven't changed much over the centuries. First, we thought it was a sign of demonic possession. Then in 400 BC, Hippocrates changed the game by skipping religious cures and treating the mentally ill by changing their environment and by giving them medicine. But the Middle Ages saw us return to the idea that mental illness was proof of possession or maybe just immoral behavior. Such negative attitudes toward mental illness continued in the United States into the 18th century, leading to the stigmatization of mental illness and the inhumane confinement and treatment of the mentally ill. It was in the 1840s that Dorothea Dix lobbied for better living conditions for the mentally ill after seeing for herself the very dangerous and unhealthy conditions in which people were living. Over a 40-year period, she was able to successfully get the United States government to build 32 state psychiatric hospitals. The result was an outpouring of gratitude. Families finally felt that their loved ones were being taken care of and getting the kind of help that they really needed and really deserved. They could trust that their loved ones were being taken care of by professional staff. But while institutionalized care did increase patient access to mental health services, state hospitals were chronically underfunded and understaffed. So the system began receiving justifiably harsh criticism for poor living conditions and for violating patient human rights. By the mid-1950s, antipsychotic drugs became available, and the push for deinstitutionalization began. The idea was to move patients to community-centered care based on the belief that they would have a higher quality of life if they were treated in smaller communities rather than in large, isolated mental hospitals. In 1963, President John F. Kennedy signed the Community Mental Health Act. It changed the admission criteria to psychiatric hospitals so that only individuals who posed an imminent danger to themselves or someone else could be committed. And it was supposed to provide federal funding for the construction of community-based preventative care and treatment facilities. Unfortunately, between the Vietnam War and the economic crisis, the program was never adequately funded. Medicaid was passed in 1965, but it excluded coverage for people in institutions for mental diseases. That meant that the state had a huge incentive to move people out of the psychiatric hospitals and into nursing homes and general hospitals. In 1980, President Jimmy Carter signed the Mental Health Systems Act, which was supposed to lead to the restructuring of community mental health centers and improve services for people with chronic mental illness. But in 1981, under President Ronald Reagan, the Omnibus Budget Reconciliation Act repealed Carter's legislation, established block grants for the states, and ended the federal government's role in providing services for the mentally ill. This was the final step in deinstitutionalization. And in the process, the federal government decreased funding for mental health by 30%. In the aftermath of the Great Recession of 2009, states were forced to cut $4.35 billion in public mental health spending over the next 3 years, the largest reduction in funding since deinstitutionalization. So in 2010, there were only 43,000 psychiatric beds in the United States, or about 14 beds per 100,000 people, which brought us right back to the same ratio as in 1850. Today, nearly 400,000 people in jail or prison have a mental illness. That's 10 times the number of people who are in mental hospitals. 7 people die by suicide every hour in our country, and 22 veterans take their life every day in the United States. In all, untreated mental illness costs the United States about $281 billion a year. It includes the consequences of unemployment, unnecessary disability, substance abuse, incarceration, and more. In place of institutionalized care, there's supposed to be a network of community-based mental health care that includes community mental health centers, residential homes, and community-based psychiatric teams. But in 2014 and 15, our own state slashed funding for mental illness by 60%. And as a result, programs closed and people lost much-needed services. In Michigan, the Community Mental Health Association concluded that there was a $150 million gap between the cost of mental health care and the funding being provided to the state's public mental health system. In 1997, 35% of the state's general funds went to support community mental health. Now only 5% of general funds support mental health care. Need, on the other hand, has not gone down. My experience with my son is not unique. We know that 1 in 4 people will experience a serious mental illness during their lifetime, which means 3 out of 4 of us will have a loved one who experiences a serious mental illness during their lifetime. 1 in 5 adults in Ottawa County report being in poor mental health. And our youth are in crisis. 29% report depression. In a classroom right now of 30 students in Ottawa County, 5 of those students have seriously considered suicide, and 2 or 3 have made an attempt. Now, the good news is that 70 to 90% of individuals with a mental illness see an improvement in their symptoms and their quality of life after participating in some form of treatment. Doesn't even really matter what form. If they get some form of treatment, they improve. The bad news is that 60% of people with mental illness never seek any treatment at all. And the number 1 barrier to seeking treatment is stigma. In fact, 58% of people with mental illness say that the stigma is more difficult to deal with than the mental illness itself. On an individual level, stigma prevents treatment and recovery. On a systemic level, stigma results in lower prioritization of public resources allocated to mental health services Stigma isolates people and only makes mental illness worse. Which brings me back to Alex's story. During his first break, when he was 16, I got a phone call from the school telling me that I needed to come pick him up because he was clearly on something. So he'd been staying at his dad's. I didn't know what he might be on. I picked him up, I brought him home, and I kept him at my house where I knew he didn't take anything. And the next morning, I brought him to school knowing that he should be fine. But he was only there about an hour when I got another call from the school telling me I had to pick him up because he was clearly not there and on something. So I remember driving to the school and kind of hoping he was on something. Because if he wasn't, like, what possibly could be going on? So I picked him up and I brought him to Hackley's emergency room, and they tested him. He didn't have anything in his system. And then they ended up transporting him by ambulance, like handcuffing him almost, to get him to Pine Rest. It was a very traumatic experience. He arrived, I think I just said Pine Rest. He actually went to Forest View. And he arrived, and they discharged him far too soon, and we didn't really know what was going on, but we tried managing things. And then a year later, he was at the tech center when I got a call telling me that I needed to come pick up my son because he couldn't find his locker, he couldn't find the glasses that were on top of his head. He just was clearly not, again, responsive and there. So I picked him up, and because the experience at Forest View had been so traumatic, we didn't bring him back to inpatient care. We really tried to manage it through day program and made an adjustment in his meds and kind of tried to continue. We were very fortunate in the fact that he had already earned enough credits at Central that he was able to graduate because he was never able to return to school. We tried a couple of days, and it was just, yeah, I was called and asked to retrieve him. So he was out. We were having varying levels of success. And then we took a walk together in the spring of 2014. I was walking with him on Harbor Island in Grand Haven, and he asked me if I saw it. And I asked him what, and he said Magic City. And then he went on to tell me about his spirit animals and mine. And I was kind of perplexed because on one hand, he started sharing what I could think were some pretty deep spiritual truths about how we're all connected and being able to effortlessly communicate. And on the other hand, something was clearly wrong. I couldn't see the cardinal, and I couldn't see the canary, and I couldn't hear the music. So we decided we needed to go to the hospital again. I had no idea that things would get so much worse before they got better. So I want to clear up one misunderstanding that people often have about schizophrenia right now. Despite what the news media might say, violence is not even a symptom of schizophrenia. When my son is most symptomatic, he mostly stares into space, communicates with people that I can't see, will walk into the road and stop, and so puts himself in danger in those kind of ways, but is not a violent person. When he's symptomatic, I have to constantly remind myself that he's not being deliberately disrespectful or belligerent, that he's not being rude intentionally. He's just very distant from me, and I need to allow him space to move silently within his own mind. At those times, my most important role is not to try to tell him that what he's experiencing isn't real, because it's very real. My most important role is just to keep him safe. I want to share a letter, portion of a letter that he dictated to me when he was being weaned off all of his medications so that we could try kind of the last-ditch medication. It was a pretty terrifying time. It was when he was seeing visions of his friends committing suicide in different grisly ways. He dictated this. I am schizophrenic. It started at 16 years old. At 17, I started to find out about Magic City. At first, it seemed like a good place. It should be a good place, except for bullies and terrorists inside. There are groups of people who make life hard, like destroying feelings that you get from music, making people feel like nothing, being sad when you're not. Groups of people doing things that make it hard to think and stuff like that. They try to turn your thoughts against you. They make you make decisions between things that are very messed up, like either tonight you will be a suicide or a homicide. Like today that happened to me. I believe I'm not the only one, but I might be. I am a prime target as far as I know. I can't stand it. I wake up to me being happy and feeling like myself, body, mind, and flesh. And after I get out of bed and I'm up and going, it all starts all over again. It starts maybe 10 minutes after I'm up. This is an SOS message. I'm not asking for money. I'm only asking for a place to stay far away from where I live, where I can be safe and under the protection of the Pawn Stars. And I hope that you will send me a letter back. Robin Williams hanged himself, and Magic City might have had something to do with it. Magic City is scaring me. So research tells us the most important thing for regaining or maintaining our health is human connection. But I can tell you that when you start acting really bizarre, people don't hang around. So by the time we were able to stabilize Alex, he had lost all of his friendships. So how does somebody like that even begin to make connections again? Stigma had stolen all of those relationships. So if we're going to defeat stigma, it's going to take all of us normalizing the conversation and sharing our stories. Mental illness is ultimately a community issue that requires a community response, or it becomes a community crisis. So I want to talk about how we can all be part of a community solution. That's where the Momentum Center comes in. In 2016, this county did something that nobody else in the state had done. It passed a mental health millage to address the shortfalls that we were experiencing in funding. And that millage is what allowed the Momentum Center to open. The Momentum Center is creating a community where every person is fully visible and connected. We just moved into our new location in Grand Haven in the former Rendezvous restaurant in August. And we opened our location in Holland about a year and a half ago. We moved into the former Community Action House building on 14th Street, which has been a wonderful facility for us, but it's a short-term facility. They're selling that building, so we are looking for some place to land in Holland. We fill the gap between the individual and clinical services. We offer social and recreational activities for people who have mental illness, addictions, and disabilities. It costs $1 a year to be a member, and no formal diagnosis or referral is needed. We focus on early intervention and prevention as much as anything, so anybody can join. On site, we offer meditation, yoga, exercise, classes in nutrition, journaling, financial literacy, as well as bingo and arts and crafts and games. Sporting events, I was just wondering if that was mine, sorry. We also take outings locally at least once a week. Could be anything from going grocery shopping to a park, to miniature golf, to a restaurant. And at least once a month we go further away. Meyer Gardens, the zoo, the orchard, someplace people would not normally have access to. And that's all included in that $1 membership fee. We get a lot of referrals from therapists because we're a place where you can get your behavioral health script met. You meet with your therapist and they tell you, eat right, get some exercise, spend time with positive people, see me in another month. There's a whole lot of hours between months. And there's a lot of people without a clue how to do that. So we offer that. We offer the nutrition, the physical exercise, and the social connection. And everything we do is optional. So one of the things that makes us a unique model is autonomy. You get to decide what you will participate in and what you don't want to participate in. We have a very robust calendar, and we send that out to our members. We also provide social integration with the outings, but also by operating the VU Cafe in Grand Haven, which hopefully will be open. I think I just had to move it from April 1 to May 1, but we're going to get there, I promise. And the Momentum Ice Cream Parlor in Holland. The whole point is to help members know that they're part of the community and to bring the community in so that we can dismantle those stereotypes and stigma. We never want to be that building over there for those people. We really want to create that social connectedness. All of us are struggling with something at some time, and we're all in this together. This is a infographic that just kind of lays out the work that we're doing. So in the blue, and you can't see this really well from your seats probably, but the blue talks about the social and recreational programs. And again, we refer people for therapeutic services. So if you need clinical therapeutic care, we refer you out. Clinicians refer people to us. We have found, since opening in Holland, a very high level of acuity. And 30% of we have about 120 Holland members right now. 30% of them have both a developmental disability and a mental illness. We're programmatically doing great. Now we need to find the funding to pay for the services. All of the money that we get from the millage goes to the social rec program. It's not enough for the social rec program. It pays about 44% of those costs, but that's the only place millage money goes. So if you've heard that millage money is paying for DEI or anything else, it's not true. It's only going for social rec. We also do community conversations, fully supported by non-millage funds. We do talk about diversity and equity and inclusion because we don't believe we're dealing with whole people if we're not doing that. So we have community conversations. We work really hard to bring together, to address social determinants of mental health. Because again, if we aren't addressing the systemic issues, social discrimination, then we're ignoring whole parts of human beings. Going back. And then we also have our social enterprise, which are our cultural immersion experiences. And those are ways that we also seek to create an income stream. So people pay to go on trips. We don't just send members to Morocco for a couple of weeks. So we are a leader in Ottawa County and facilitating community conversations about the social determinants of mental health. We have town hall meetings, we have Inspire events. For 2 years, we led virtual town hall meetings on race and racism. And we have free dinner and movie night events every month in Grand Haven and free popcorn and movie events every month in Holland. We're going to synchronize those now so that we're showing the same movie the same night. And we have a couple of really good ones coming up. There's a movie we're going to be part of with the City of Holland. They're showing The Great Disconnect at the Knickerbocker Theater this week. I think it's Thursday night. So if you can be there, be there. There'll be a little panel discussion afterward. And then we've received funding from Gentex so that we can do a second showing of that movie for our April movie night. So if you can't be there in March, another chance to watch that movie in April. And then in May, we're partnering with Arbor Circle to show Screenagers, which deals with our teens and screen time and the impact that that's having. We also have cultural immersion experiences. I lead international trips, again, as a fundraiser. I partner with people in the communities we go to. So they're not vacations and they're not mission trips. We go to see what we have to learn from other cultures. We go to China, Tibet, Kenya, Honduras, Egypt, and Morocco. We also have the Civil Rights Road Trip, and I will be back next week along with folks from Hope Church who were on the Civil Rights Road Trip last year, including Patty, who's sitting over here, to talk about that experience. We do have another trip coming up this April, but as of right now, all of those seats are sold. So that's exciting. We take a bus, 4-day immersion to Selma, Birmingham, Memphis, and Montgomery. Life-changing. And across the bridge is our exchange with Muskegon. We do a leadership exchange between Spring Lake, Grand Haven, and Muskegon to address the cultural and racial divide right across the drawbridge. So, and I wanted to mention our prom. This is our signature event. It's both our major fundraiser, but also about social integration. We bring people together for this prom that would not normally spend the night together. People who will spend $1,000 on an auction item, and people who could never have dreamed of saving up $35 for their own ticket. We make sure that any of our members who want to go are able to go. We do keep the price at $35 so it's accessible to people, but it's a night of dinner and dancing, and it's just one of the most phenomenal things you'll experience. So I encourage you to think about that. And we're planning a Holland homecoming. So that's going to be kind of our mirror event in Holland. We'll have prom in Grand Haven in the spring and a homecoming in Holland in the fall. So stay tuned. The most important thing to talk about is the impact we're having. We know that we are saving lives, and I can give you lots of actual experiences of that. We're giving people hope and meaning and purpose. Our members are showing statistically significant improvements in depression, in anxiety, in loneliness, social connectedness, and feelings of stigma. We continue to prioritize research of our evidence-based programs, and we know, because of this research, that every dollar we receive from the millage creates a $4 return on investment. People get better while needing less costly interventions. It's our long-term goal to share our program across the state and across the country as a model that can be adapted to fit any community. We've also identified our work as a change agent to motivate against stigma. Those anti-stigma efforts have influenced 20% of the population, and we continue to work with our partners to collect more hard data. We know we can't just do this based on our feel-good stories. But instead of talking any more about it, I want to let you listen to our members.
I'm Don Avery, President of the Board of the Momentum Center. We are creating a community where every person is fully visible and connected. We lead community conversations to break down stigma and stereotypes and offer social and recreational activities for people with mental illness, addictions, and disabilities. We fill the gap in the continuum of care between the individual and clinical services.
I'm Barbara Van Horssen, the experimenter at the Momentum Center. I want you to hear from our members about the nature of our work and the impact we're having. And then we want to introduce you to Building Momentum, our new capital campaign that represents a long-term investment in the health and well-being of the whole community.
I had just come out of the hospital. I had issues, and I was still looking for my little niche in Grand Haven. A coworker of my husband suggested I come volunteer here. And I walked through the doors, didn't know anybody, only saw this blue building, and the rest is history.
I was valuable as a person, not in spite of the panic disorder and the anxiety and the depression, but I was valued as a whole person. And I get emotional talking about that because this place has really been an anchor in my life, and I've seen it. I've seen how it's impacted so many other people's lives in a truly positive way.
So I'm actually a suicide attempt survivor, and I attempted when I was 14. So it's something that's really hard for me to talk about a lot of the time. Since that experience, I've always been trying to find a place to feel like myself, a place to feel connected to others. And on that journey, I found Momentum Center.
The staff, excellent. I love the members. I myself am a member.
I like and I enjoy everything. I like all the activities they do. I like journey writing. They take us on outings.
I needed the help socially, and the staff said they were also members, so that made me feel safe and comfortable.
It's one thing to say, I want an inclusive community, but the way that they do it is they build real relationships between people.
I'm a member, I'm a volunteer, I'm a board member now, and I'm fully committed to their mission, which is to create a stigma-free community and to make sure everyone feels welcomed, accepted, and like there's a space for them to be who they are fully.
I'm Emily Korchnak, Treasurer for the Momentum Center and co-chair of the Building Momentum Capital Campaign. Building Momentum is working to raise enough money to purchase the previous Rendezvous building in Grand Haven. This strategic move will provide better accessibility and more adequate space for programming and public events. The new facility will allow the Momentum Center to expand its reach and provide critical mental health services to our community where mental health needs continue to grow. We invite you to join us in building momentum.
So that's a good peek into our work. I wanted to mention some of the ways that you might want to get involved, how you can help. One is to help with the Building Momentum campaign. We need to raise $2 million, and we have about $217,000 to go. So we're in the final leg and need help getting over that final hurdle. And that really will create a much more stable financial future because we're investing in an asset instead of spending a lot of money in rent, which will help us continue our work in Holland. We need to find those financial wins because the need is so great. We've got to keep it up. Support our operations, and that can be both through financial support and also by telling people what we're really doing. I mentioned that there have been some comments made out in kind of some public settings that are just not true. And if I know you're all familiar with what's happening in the county with our commissioners, they're not a fan of our work, and they're working to end the millage money that we receive. So right now, we believe that funding will end after June. We need help. Volunteer. There's so many opportunities for volunteering, which can be anything from coming in and just listening to members. People need somebody to hear their stories, to witness to their lives, to leading classes, to going on outings, to doing back-of-house things, getting involved on committees, getting on the pipeline for the board. You can be as involved as little or as much as you like. Attend our events, participate in our conversations, and most importantly, help normalize the conversation. When people ask how you're doing, answer honestly. If part of how you care for yourself is taking medication, talk about that. Or walking in the woods, or however you're taking care of your emotional well-being, make that part of the regular conversation and not the secret that we don't talk about. We do this for people like my son. who desperately need community. I'm very happy to say that he's been stable for almost 10 years now. It doesn't mean that Magic City is gone, but Magic City's not scary. It's a safe place. We don't know what the future holds, but we're appreciating every minute of our todays. Today, he looks forward to grilling the hot dogs and hamburgers at our community dinner and movie night. That's his way of giving back to the community that he has found. That was really a lifeline to him. Now, I recognize that I take a risk in sharing with you so openly my son's story, and I don't do that without his permission. I always get his permission to share his story because I realize he's taking an even bigger risk. And that is that by sharing his experience, that you'll leave here feeling sorry for him. He doesn't need your sympathy. He needs you to feel empowered to dismantle stigma and to demand that mental illness be treated with the respect and the resources that it deserves. I admire his courage, and I hope we can all be so brave. And I am happy to answer any questions you might have. Namaste.
I'm just reminded that we have 2 mics, and just a reminder that this is being recorded for the general public, so any questions or comments will be known outside this room.
Thank you for your presentation. I really admire what you're doing. Excuse me, I'm losing my voice. Do you have an age limit?
We have, so our adult program is 18 and up. We've had people in their 80s. And then we have a youth program that starts at 11 and goes through 17, 18 if you're still in high school.
Okay, we have a grandson who's struggling with mental illness. Lives in Krakow, Poland, actually, and his parents are almost at their wits' end. He's a dual citizen. Would he qualify? He's 22 years old.
Absolutely.
If he established residency here, perhaps?
Yeah, he wouldn't even need to do that.
Oh.
It's $1 a year. I will say we don't do, so yes, he can join for $1 a year. He has to come in and fill out the application. We do a safety screen. We never sit at the corner and just say, hey, it's only $1, let's get 900 people to sign up, because we want people to participate, not just be members. And so we track participation as well. If we haven't seen somebody for the month, we're reaching out proactively to find out what's going on. So our contact rate, I don't think has ever been below 95%. It's usually 98%. We know what's happening with our members. And yeah, citizenship is not a requirement.
Thank you.
I'm David Myers. I want to echo Milton thanking you for a terrific presentation. It was really interesting and informative. I have a whole bunch of questions, but just to ask 2. One's a very simple one. You describe yourself as your title is experimenter. I want you to unpack that for me. And secondly, and this is maybe a more challenging question, you described a great diverse range of people with mental disability issues, from developmental disabilities, teen depression and suicide risk, adult schizophrenia, loneliness, anxiety, depression. We do have some agencies and programs that are focused on supporting people with disabilities or teens who are struggling and so forth. Is there a challenge for the Momentum Center to, in a sense, if I could be a devil's advocate, to lack a focus and to try to bring people together who are so very different and might have trouble relating to each other? Or do you have focus groups within each of those? Do you want to speak to that?
Sure. So first question, my title is hyphenated, experimenter. And it's for two reasons. One is I believe that one of my primary roles is to be a mentor of experiences. The other is that everything we do is an experiment. We try it. If it works, we do some more of it. If it doesn't, we learn and we tweak. To your second question, the whole idea of blending populations. I believe that one of the reasons we have been so successful is that we have done away with those pillars of definition and the requirement to say that I'm either developmentally disabled or I have a mental illness or I have an addiction. It's bringing together everybody without those silos. At the same time, I liken it a lot to kind of a church experience. So Sunday morning, everybody comes together, and then you also have a quilters guild and a choir and a men's group. And so we have also what we call affinity groups, which are for particular people who identify with a particular diagnosis or identity. And we're adding more of those all the time. Sometimes we add one and it takes off for a while and then it fades, much like church programs. So it's a both and. We have been, one of the criticisms that we actually received from Ottawa Impact was the blending of populations and an assumption that people with disabilities are being put in a risky situation with people with mental illness. It's kind of the worst of stereotypes that we're working so hard to dismantle. It's really worked wonderfully well. At the same time, we're happy to be moving into a time now where we're going to offer more developmentally disabled specific programs and mental illness specific programs. So both and.
This is a little more mundane perhaps, but I'm wondering, do you have your sights on a building in Holland?
Not right now. We're working right now. There's another church that actually uses our space Sunday morning, so they're looking, and we're kind of looking together. And if you have ideas, I have talked to a few realtors. People are keeping their eyes out, but we don't have anything solid right now. We expect to need to move by late fall.
I'm Ruth.
I know you.
Barbara, I'm wondering about the frequency with which people come. Like, are there people who are there every day? And then some who just pop in now and then? Tell us about what's more typical. And the word in my head is like, is a day program? Do some people treat it like a day program? Or is everyone working? What are the other activities? And that kind of thing is what I'm curious about.
Yeah, so we're specifically not a day program. It's program based. We're not a drop-in center. You can't just come and watch TV for 8 hours. It is program based. But that being said, we try to have back-to-back programming while we're open so that people don't necessarily have to leave and then come back, that there are options, just because transportation can be such an issue. We do have people who come for specific things on the calendar. We send out the calendar every month, and people will show up for particular activities. We have others who come every day without a clue what's on the calendar and show up and say, okay, what are we doing today? And we are their day-to-day community. We also have people who treat the Momentum Center like a support group. When things are bad, when they feel like they're in crisis, they're there. And then when things get better, they are not there anymore until things go wrong again, and then we see them return. And it is across the board. Again, we're trying to dismantle the stereotypes. So I do have people with mental illness and cognitive dysfunction, and I have a data scientist and an attorney who are members. I mean, and everything in between.
Barbara, say something more about the county funding and what the loss of that will mean to Momentum Center. I presume the millage funding will still be coming to the county, but they have the right to decide how they want to allocate or spend that funding. How much is it? What proportion of your budget is it? Just talk a little more about that.
Sure. So to bring you back in time a little bit, it was 2015 that the nonprofit started. It started with the name Extended Grace, and I started it with 2 other people. And our whole idea was we wanted to connect people who wanted to make a difference with opportunities to do that, while also looking for where there might be gaps in the community that we could bring some energy and synergy to. So we started with just community conversations, and over again, the number one concern that kept coming up was around mental illness. So we started having town halls on mental illness, and we convened the Mental Illness Task Force, which was a combination of leaders in the community and citizens who were living with mental illness, and started imagining what needed to fill the gap. If you recall, this was about the time Can Do had closed its doors. The funding cuts were all going on, and so this group started envisioning the social and recreational program. And then the millage got passed, which created the funding for it. I thought we were going to help launch it, and then we'd focus on the next thing. But CMH said, we don't want to run that. We want you to write the RFP. So we wrote the RFP, and we were successful in getting that funding. So originally, the social rec program was 100% funded by the millage. It's the CMH social rec program, and so they provided the money for us to do it. I think we took off gangbusters and accomplished far more than anybody thought we were going to accomplish. So right now, we get $290,000 a year from the millage, and that represents about 44% of our budget. So it's a significant piece. The good news is it's not 100% of our budget anymore, and we're not going away. You're right that the commission does not determine where those millage money go, but the CMH board does, and 4 of the members of the CMH board are Ottawa Impact Commissioners, and 3 of the other members are appointees of the commission, and 3 of the terms of people who have been there and are strong allies are coming up in April and May. And so those positions will all be replaced. So that's where and you can watch the videos. The CMH meetings are all recorded too. And they have expressed concern about both the blending of populations, which is why and we actually, before this, were asking to have mental illness only activities, and we're told we couldn't do that. So the good news is it's a win-win. We can do that and developmentally disabled. And then the work we've done around race and LGBT support is the big sticking point.
If I could just follow up on that. So then, it sounds like the funding will end. And secondly, if it does, that funding is still there, and the CMH board is going to have to allocate it to something else, correct?
Correct. And they're talking about, there's a subcommittee that's been meeting about the millage and what they're going to do with those funds. I think they're going to put together an RFP and invite other people to apply for those. There's a big concern, it's a legitimate concern that we have housing issues. I'm sure everybody's aware of that. What we get in social rec is not going to resolve a housing problem. So I think there's a bit of a misunderstanding. I think there are some people who feel like if they're not seeing the services that they think should be there, there must be someone to blame. And I think we've just gotten kind of that we managed to get in that target. So it's, I think people trying to make sense of it, but not really understanding, and we're being scapegoated. Yes.
I'm Dave Alexander. Ottawa is a big county, and when you say Grand Haven and Holland, that seems to be the western edge of a county. And you got northern and southern corners. But there's a big county out there. Is anybody else doing this kind of stuff across all the way over to Kent? Thank you.
So our model is very unique, and that's why, again, we put in data collection at the very beginning, because we knew if it worked, we'd want to share it. When we got millage money, initially, that was funding to serve the northwest quadrant of the county. We came to Holland because we were asked to come to Holland. The results that we're getting have been really great. Our model's much different because it's a whole program. The quadrants that get funding from the millage for social rec, the other programs added a program to what they were doing. And it's primarily in the disability community. So ICUS, Heritage Homes, and Pioneer Resources are the other three that get funding. Now, we did just get approved for a micro grant that's allowing us to do a pilot program with transportation. So for 3 months, we're going to be able to provide transportation for people outside of the MAX line or the Harbor Transit line. And 1 day a week, we'll bring people to Holland, and 1 day a week, we'll bring people to Grand Haven, and see what that does to numbers. Because I hear all the time that, you know, they need a program in Allendale, they need a program in Coopersville. We would love to serve that need. It's just finding the resources to be able to do that. We've also had conversation with Network 180 and Health West in Muskegon. There's a lot of interest in the model. It's just figuring out the money. At $1 a year membership, it's not a membership model, right?
Do you get any funding from the Holland Zealand Foundation?
We got an initial, we got some initial funding, which is really why we said, okay, good, now we'll come to Holland, but we haven't been able to get support from them since that initial funding. And I think that's, if we could get like a year to just really be able to stabilize programmatically and spend then all of our effort in the relationship building around donor development, that's what we need. Yes?
Barbara, would you talk, so questions about stigma. What kind of things come up regularly that just reinforce the stigma that you try to address and undo? And is there stigma that's specific to West Michigan and or Ottawa County that you're constantly needing to address, apart from Ottawa Impact?
I think some of the assumptions I mentioned, like around schizophrenia, the idea that people with schizophrenia are to be feared, that they're violent and dangerous. I have a stepdaughter who has Down syndrome. So when I share that with people, people will lean in and say, oh, she must be wonderful. And I say, yes, she is. And I also have a son who has schizophrenia. And then they retract, and you can see it. I mean, you can see it happen. And I think, I try to make a point of mentioning our members with mental illness who are successful professionals. And this isn't just about, people will use the expression like the kids, right? Like, and They're not kids. They're grown-ass people. Excuse my language. And again, it crosses all of the continuums, right? All demographics, and the more we don't acknowledge that, the harder we make it for people to self-identify and to seek out treatment. So I think those are the biggest stereotypes that kind of continue to be perpetuated. And I think we are in a place where people also will avoid treatment because they're waiting for God or Jesus to intervene. And so it's about prayer warriors as opposed to seeking out actual clinical assistance. I think both are helpful.
So I just want to follow up a little more on the funding. So if the county funding decides to end in June, does that mean cold turkey, boom, or is your funding committed through the end of the year? And that's my first question related to that. If the November election changes the Board of Commissioners, how soon could it be potentially reestablished? And would you have a gap in there? It seems to me it would be a little easier if you had a gap that needed to be filled by private donations to do that. Anyway, talk us through the timing here.
Yeah, so one thing I want to mention right away is that the millage was passed in 2016. It's a 10-year millage. So the whole millage is up for election again in 2026. So I knew when we started that you don't just take away services from people who've already been denied services. Like, you just don't abandon people who've already been abandoned. So we have been very, very fiscally responsible throughout the time we've been open. With my goal being we need to create a backfill for a transition year if that millage didn't pass. So now we're in a situation sooner than that, but we do have funding for a transition year. So we're not going anywhere. As I said, with this building campaign too, when we talked about that and talked about the possibility of losing the funding, it became even more obvious that we needed to do this. It became like it's not even an option now. We have to secure a site and own it and not be paying all this money in rent. Also with that site, we'll be licensing the kitchen to the VU Cafe, which it'll be licensed to the US Cafe in Muskegon, who work with people with developmental disabilities, providing housing and job training. So they're already qualified by the Lakeshore Regional Entity to do job skills training. And they're licensing the kitchen. So we'll have an income stream from that, and we don't need to be in the restaurant business, which really makes me happy, because that is not my thing. So we're working hard to build all these financial structures. I think, again, we have kind of some support for this transition year. Hopefully then the new election changes the dynamic and we can restore that funding and we can get the millage passed. We are not going away. Worst case scenario, we'll maybe have to do a little less than we're doing now, but we're going to keep doing it. And part of what we'll be doing with this pilot program with transportation is testing, like bringing people from Holland to Grand Haven. And what's the most cost-efficient way to serve people? There are other programs, you were mentioning that. There are other programs that serve populations we serve, but we talked to all of them before we came, and the clubhouse wanted us to come, and the drop-in center wanted us to come. We are filling a need and a gap.
Thank you.
So the divine in me recognizes and bows to the divine in you. Namaste.
I learned a lot. Thank you very much. That was very helpful. Couple reminders. August primary is very important before November. So please remember to vote in August and November. Just quick reminder about that, to keep that in mind. And next week, as Barbara has already said, Barbara will be back, and we're going to talk about the Civil Rights Trail. Betsy Snyder and Patty Brink, who's here today, and Vicki Rumsa went on that trip with Barbara a year ago. And Larry and I have been to many of these civil rights road places. And so we're going to participate in that panel as well in talking about the various sites that are actually on the U.S. You can Google the U.S. Civil Rights Trail. It's actually a National Historic site and trip, and there's a great website that describes and has a lot of information that you can also look up. But we'll be talking about that next week, and we invite you back. Thank you very much.